It's interracial crime stats.
Interracial crime stats. And I don't know, not everyone covers this stuff, but here on the show, we don't hold back.
Yeah.
Can you read the numbers are in?
2024, blacks killed 458 whites. Whites killed 84 blacks. The United States is 13.7% black and 58.4% white. Blacks are 23 times more likely to kill a white person than whites are to kill a black person.
Very interesting. But according to Joe Biden, our biggest threat as a nation is this.
Terrorism from white supremacy is the most lethal threat to the homeland today. Not ISIS, not Al-Qaeda, white supremacists.
And we're live. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Jimmy Dore Show. I'm Aaron Mate, sitting in for Jimmy, playing a little shorthanded today. Americans comedian Kurt Metzger is off, although if you're in Nashville, you can catch him tonight and tomorrow. That's Saturday. Still some tickets left. Jimmy's also on the road, of course, on the East Coast. Check his website, jimmydore.com, for tickets and try to catch him. He's playing New York, Atlantic City. That might have happened already. Anyway, Eastern Seaboard, jimmydore.com. Get tickets. Catch Jimmy live. And today on the show, we'll be talking a lot about the story of the week, which is Liberation Day, the liberation era in which Trump has imposed tariffs on the entire world, and the stock market and the economy is in turmoil as a result. What's really going on? Well, we're going to be speaking to economics professor James Galbraith. We'll also have coverage of the return of Nina Jankowicz. Nina Jankowicz, everybody, if you remember her, that was the lady known as Scary Poppins, who Joe Biden tapped as his disinformation czar until her videos surfaced of her singing a Mary Poppins type song about censoring people who she doesn't like. And then she was canceled from that job. But she's back in Congress and still smearing reporters who dared to report about censorship, like Matt Taibbi. So we'll be covering that and a whole lot more. But first, we're going to turn to Syria. And here we go. I need this. Okay. All right. So here's the headline from the New York Times. Syrians wake up to a new government. The list of ministers appears to be a compromise between calls for a diverse cabinet to unite the divided country while keeping allies of the interim president Ahmed al-Shara in powerful roles. Who is Ahmed al-Shara? Well, he used to be known until recently as Mohammed al-Jilani, the founding leader of al-Qaeda in Syria and the former deputy leader of ISIS. He led the successful rebellion that ousted the longtime Syrian president Bashar al-Assad in December. Now, for people in Washington who've been cheering on the al-Qaeda dominated insurgency in Syria that was fighting Assad, this was very exciting. And what did they initially tell us about HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the coalition that led the uprising, and its leader al-Jilani, aka al-Shara? They said this: how Syria's diversity-friendly jihadists plan on building a state. So yes, these diversity-friendly jihadists were going to give us a diverse jihadi-led, al-Qaeda-led state in Syria after Assad's ouster. Let's check in with the author of this piece, Aaron Zelin, because he wrote this back in December when Assad was overthrown. Let's check in on what Aaron Zelin is saying now about the diversity-friendly jihadists and how they're building a new state in Syria. Initial view of the new Syrian government after sleeping on it, subject to changing my mind, of course. All of the key portfolios remain in the hands of HTS guys: foreign affairs, defense, interior, justice. So the diversity-friendly jihadists, shockingly, don't have any diversity when it comes to the most important portfolios: foreign affairs, defense, interior, justice. All of those go to HTS guys. And what does HTS stands for? That's Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, aka Al-Qaeda. They used to be called something else, al-Nusra in Syria. They changed their name to HTS, but it's all the same people, including the founding leader of Al-Qaeda in Syria, al-Jilani, as the government's leader. Outside of that, it's a very technocratic, and it's people from all the main ethnic religious groups. Still a bit disappointing that there is only one woman minister, though. So after all that, the diversity-friendly jihadists managed to find only one woman to occupy a ministerial role. So to discuss Syria's new government in the post-Assad area, let's bring in our guest, Kevork Almassian. Kevork Almassian is a Syrian journalist and geopolitical analyst who hosts the show Syriana Analysis on YouTube. Kevork, welcome to the Jimmy Dore Show.
Thank you, Aaron, for having me. It's a really pleasure to be with you.
You are from Syria. You have covered your country's turmoil for a very, very long time. What do you make of your new rulers? By the way, held without an election. They just appointed themselves.
Actually, the first observation that I have to make is the self-elected president of Syria. I have done research about him, and it seems he doesn't even have a secondary school certificate. So probably he doesn't even know how to write and speak correctly Arabic. In any ways, nowadays we have a government dominated by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or formerly known Nusra Front. Most of the ministers are affiliated with HTS or they are endorsed by HTS. Now, on the outlook, they always try to speak about diversity, inclusivity, because the handlers of Abu Muhammad al-Jolani, especially especially in the democratic wing in the US establishment, they have been pushing this script on Abu Muhammad al-Jawlani since he took over Aleppo in November, December 2024. So he started first changing his clothing, and then he shaved his beard, and he changed his terminologies from the calling the Christians and Alawites as infidels and heretics, etc., into now he wants to reach out to these communities and that he wants to include everyone. However, the government gives a glimpse and quite good indication that the government is highly dominated by HTS. Then we have few other considerations. For example, the Syrian opposition was very complicated construct, some of which were affiliated with the Qatari money, others with Saudi money, others with Turkish money, others with CIA. So each one of these are represented in the Syrian government, including people who were very active in the US Congress in order to impose harsher sanctions on Syria. And they have been engaging with the neocons and the Zionist lobby in the US to impose further sanctions. And nowadays they are in the new Syrian government led by Jawlani. Now, one of these ministers, now I don't want to name names because it brings lots of troubles. In August 2011, Aaron, I was in Damascus in an office of a professor because I wanted to apply for scholarship in outside in the UK. And this professor in August 2011 told me that I shouldn't really be vocal about my opinion on the Syrian war. And this was only a few months after this war started, because the American friends told him that Assad is going to go in 3 months. So it's better you keep your silence because he will leave and then you lose opportunities. And there was another person sitting there. He told me, you need to listen to your professor. And this person who told me you need to listen to your professor is now in the government of Abu Muhammad al-Jawlani, because they all had these ties from the beginning, receiving messages and signals from the US and from think tanks, for example, the John McCain Institute and others, that Assad's days were numbered. So they have engaged in this, let's say, mercenary opposition work for a really long time, and they have made big careers from this conflict. One other minister in this cabinet, this person vows that will open all the documents now about myself as well, that this person wants to prove that I was on the payroll of Assad. And I would like to offer my support as well to this minister, that I would come and help this person in Damascus if it is required. They will not find nothing. However, you can see that nowadays we have a really, I would say, kakistocracy. The worst of the worst in the Syrian society have become in a position of power. Therefore, I really don't have much of a hope in the future of Syria as a nation state. It will definitely go into further disintegration, probably federalism, and in worst case scenario, complete disintegration and mini states in Syria.
Now, one of the conditions that the U.S. has put forward to Syria in order to have the sanctions lifted, these sanctions that have crippled Syria's economy and caused so much misery. And now, funnily enough, the same people who advocated these sanctions for so long are now begging the U.S. to lift them, because now that Assad is gone, they have to acknowledge that these sanctions hurt the population, not Assad's inner circle, but they hurt the Syrian people. But one of the conditions that the U.S. has laid out to have the sanctions removed is that the government has to basically remove all these foreign jihadis that are a major part of the movement that swept Assad from power. Is the new government living up to that condition?
Actually, when we see the footage of the recent massacres in Syria, we notice that a considerable number of the people who committed these crimes were multinational, especially from Central Asian countries. So we have footage, for example, yesterday posted from the Umayyad Mosque in Damascus, where the leader of the Turkish AKP party, the Syrian brand or the Syrian branch, he was vowing and promising the multinational Takfiris to receive Syrian citizenship, and many of whom have been embedded now in the Syrian Ministry of Defense and Security Forces, and they have received not only Syrian citizenship but also higher positions in the Ministry of Defense, because the concept of Abu Muhammad al-Jawlani, the ideology, is about global jihad. Despite his cosmetic, let's say, abandoning of Al-Qaeda, he believes in a global jihad which could or would, let's say, spread their so-called caliphate around the world. Therefore, it makes sense for them to accept these multinational Takfiris from all around the world, because this is a collective struggle against all the world. This is not something that is exclusive to Syria. Therefore, I think that if Jawlani tries to sideline or try to degrade the influence of these multinationals, he will definitely be taken out of power, because already these multinationals aren't really happy with the recent, let's say, rhetorical approach of Abu Muhammad Jawlani, that he wants to have an inclusive government, diversity friendly, and he's not only wearing a suit, because remember, suit is from the Levant, but the tie is European. So he's even sending signals to the outside world that he has become modernized and secularized, etc., etc. So he's already receiving criticism from these multinational Takfiris in the country. And if he takes a step against them, those are 30% of HTS. So we're talking about at least like 7,000 to 10,000 multinational Takfiris. So it's going to be a civil war in the country, and he has no power to, let's say, military power to start a civil war among these HTS groups. Therefore, he will absorb them, assimilate them into the Syrian society.
And this is why I always had a hard time calling Syria's war a civil war, is because so many of the combatants weren't even Syrian. They come from foreign countries, and we're supposed to believe that they represent the Syrian people. Okay, I want to ask you about this. This is a headline from Middle East Eye. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz warned Syria's government the country would pay a heavy price if it threatened Israel's security interests. It followed a wave of Israeli strikes across Syria on Wednesday amid reports Turkey was planning to take over Syria's T4 airbase. So Israel's been bombing Syria for many years. They helped, after Assad was overthrown, Netanyahu bragged that we played a major role in this because we bombed Syria so much over the years, and also has been bombing Syria's key ally, Hezbollah, in Lebanon. But after Assad has been gone, these bombings have continued. Israel's taken advantage of the chaos and stolen a bunch of more Syrian territory. What is going on with Israel now threatening Syria continually and carrying out these bombings like this T4 airbase?
Let's put this in a proper context. Once Assad fled the country, Israel destroyed over 90% of Syria's military capabilities, including all of its air defense systems and all of its anti-tank and let's say, sea ship, etc., etc. So Syria doesn't have any type of weapons that could deter attacks from the Israeli side. Secondly, when HTS came to power, they said they are passive about Israel's occupation of Syrian territories and said that this occupation had a reason. And this reason was the presence of Hezbollah and Iranian affiliated groups in the country. So they justified the occupation of Israel of the Golan and further into Mount Hermon, claiming that those were because of the presence of Hezbollah and Iran. Now that all the Hezbollah and Iranian affiliated groups have withdrawn from Syria, HTS has found itself in a confrontation with Israel because Turkey is the main backer of HTS. And Turkey and Israel initially cooperated and collaborated in November 2024 to continue this regime change war against Assad. But for Turkey, the end goal was to install an HTS-led government in Damascus and to keep certain level of centralized government in the country. But for Israel, the end goal is not this. For Israel, the end goal is either federalism, giving the Druze and the Kurds a special status in Syria, or complete Balkanization of the country. So now that Turkey wants to establish a military base in central Syria in Palmyra, Israel sees two threats from this. One, it will threaten Israel's absolute dominance over the skies of Syria because Turkey wants to install S-400 or S-300s in Palmyra. And secondly, because Erdogan wants to convert this military base into drone manufacturing factory there. And this threatens the Sueda and the Kurds in the eastern shore of the Euphrates. So in this case, the Israeli side wants to protect its potential allies, let's say in Syria, one of which are the Druze in Sueda and the others are the Kurds or SDF in eastern shore of the Euphrates. Therefore, Israel conducted heavy bombardment yesterday on Thursday and completely decimated the T4, let's say, airport, into extent that no plane can land in the airport any longer. They have to build it all over again. So Israel has set the red line in the central Syria and told, in this case, to Turkey that your borders are in central Syria, it's in Homs, and beyond Homs, this is going to be a sphere of influence for Israel. And in this case, I want to remind your respected audience what Smotrich said a few months ago. He said,
the Israeli minister.
Yes, Israeli minister. Yeah. He said the borders of Israel stretches from Jerusalem to Damascus. Therefore, I believe that Israel is eyeing on Damascus, and they will create any justification and excuse for that. They will say there is a threat coming from Damascus against the newly annexed territories inside Syria, and they will try to create another buffer zone inside the buffer zone in the Syrian territory. So this is a struggle of power now between Turkey and Israel over Damascus. I believe that at the end of the day, if the United States was it was in an intersection to make a choice, they will side with Israel and give Israel what they want in Syria, which means a complete expansion of the Israeli forces inside Syrian territories.
Now, the new Syrian government, ruled by an al-Qaeda offshoot, HTS, their forces recently clashed with Lebanese forces on the Lebanese border. Has the new Syrian government, led by this al-Qaeda offshoot, have they fired a single shot at the Israeli forces that have bombed Israel repeatedly and taken even more Syrian territory?
Yesterday, when the Israeli forces conducted a new offensive in Dore. So we're not only talking about now Qunaytira, it's beyond Qunaytira, they're already in Dore. So once they entered a few towns in Dore, the people started calling for Golitsyn to do something about it. And they said, we want weapons, we want to fight, we're not going to give up our towns. And Israel is giving them 2 hours to leave entire towns, giving them 2 hours with flyers, telling them they have to evacuate, this is now a military zone, and they occupy it and annex it completely. So the people who ever had AK-47s, they started fighting, let's say, independently against the Israeli forces, and they were killed en masse. Because Israel had this aerial superiority, they had the drones, they were watching these unorganized fighters who spontaneously fought against Israel, and they killed a big score of the, let's say, local fighters against Israel, but there was only a statement from the Jolani government condemning the Israeli strikes against Syria and nothing more. When Jolani was asked, this was 2 weeks ago when he was in Saudi Arabia, he said, we cannot reveal our plans, how we will respond against Israel, but I think that he doesn't have neither the capacity nor the will to fight against Israel, because he will be removed in a matter of a few days if he clashes with Israel. He knows that he was installed by, between brackets, international, let's say, compromise or regional compromise between Turkey, Israel, the US, etc. And if this consensus is gone, he will also be gone, because he didn't come after a rebellion or a revolution, after popular will. No, he was installed. There was a coup d'etat in Damascus, and the Syrian army laid down its arms after the military has been infiltrated via intelligence assets, and they have received orders to lay down their arms and allow HTS to take over the country.
Okay. All right. We'll move on to our next segment. We don't need to go to a break or anything. We'll just move on. All right. Here's the headline from Amnesty International. Syria coastal massacres of Alawite civilians must be investigated as war crimes. Government-affiliated militias deliberately killed civilians from Alawite minority. And this is a reference to this wave of massacres that Syria has seen for several weeks now, where militias under the control of the new government have carried out massacres, slaughtered thousands of people, most of them from the Alawite minority. And this is exactly the outcome that those of us who criticized and opposed the dirty war in Syria were warning about for so long, because the insurgency that was being empowered by the CIA and its partners was dominated by sectarian death squads like Al-Qaeda, which now rules over the country. It's an Al-Qaeda offshoot that now rules over Syria. And so it's no surprise that massacres like this have been happening.
But Aaron, isn't it is ironic here that the Amnesty International, let's say, investigators in the past decade, they have been acting like activists on social media platforms in favor of the insurgency. And they have been so vocal about their support of this quote-unquote revolution. And every time we try to argue that, yes, there is political authoritarianism in Syria, but who is fighting this against the Assad regime? Those are sectarian death squads. And if the regime is gone and the central government collapses, then there are incidences in the region, in Iraq, in Somalia, in Sudan, and in Libya that we can build on to predict that similar outcome will happen in Syria. But they rejected this premise, and they said this is an Assadist talking point until it happened.
There are certainly some people from Amnesty International who've held that view and who've attacked me for warning about exactly this outcome we're seeing now. But, you know, Amnesty has occasionally done reports, even during the dirty war, on the atrocities. So I don't want to paint Amnesty with too broad of a brush. But let's focus on the crime at hand. Kevork, I mean, these were wholesale massacres of innocent people slaughtered in their homes by these militias under the control of the government. First of all, summarize for us what happened and what is the latest in terms of, you know, are these continuing, and will there be, as Amnesty is calling for now, any accountability?
So the massacres have slowed down in the coastal cities. They are still targeting mainly the Alawites and let's say more individual crimes than organized crime. Because when there was a clash in Latakia, in Jabal in Tartus against the HTS forces, some of the former Syrian army forces, they have ambushed the HTS forces, and they have killed, I think, 16 militants from HTS. And this was the trigger that Jolani has given the orders not only to HTS but also the Syrian National Army, which is affiliated with Turkey, the Amshad and the Hamzat militia, to go to Latakia and commit these crimes. This was an organized act of genocide, because there was the intent of committing the crime of elimination or the killing based on the religious or sectarian identity of the people. They were mass murdering basically every civilian. And this footage that we received from the coastal cities, it was a living proof that the killing was not only the goal, but also enjoying the killing, because they were proudly posting these videos themselves on social media platforms and talking in this video saying that we're here to kill the pigs, we're here to commit genocide against these minorities who stood with Assad, and the media has made this narrative in the past decade. They always said that these coastal cities are somehow a stronghold for the Assad regime. They said that the Alawite sect are entirely affiliated with the Assad family, and this has been also reported on Democracy Now! As you remember, one of the guests was trying to portray the people in the coastal cities as being somehow from the clan of Assad.
Well, Kevork, listen. Let me cut you off there, because we have that clip actually, so I want you to respond to it. Now, this is worth pointing out because it just shows how across a very wide media spectrum, not just the corporate media, but even alternative dissident media that does a great job covering topics like Palestine, as Democracy Now! Does. I think it deserves awards for the way it covers Palestine. But on Syria, unfortunately, for maybe reasons we can talk about or try to speculate, they repeat outright sectarian propaganda. So this is an example. This is before the massacres happened. Democracy Now! Brought on a BBC news journalist. Again, the BBC is owned by the UK government, which was integral to the dirty war in Syria, and who basically incited sectarian violence against Alawites. This is some of what she said.
that calling for these protests, it had a different agenda behind, because the Alawite community are worried about prosecution. Most of the Alawite community are supportive of President Assad or former President Assad, and they had contributed or been part of the crackdown, the brutal crackdown on the Syrians, arrest, torture, imprison, and killing. So they will be prosecuted, and that's why they are out and about trying to put pressure so there will be a general amnesty on the Alawite community. This is something that is impossible to happen, because the families of those who died in prison, the families of those who were bombed and tortured to death or disappeared, they need justice. They need answers about what happened to their family members, and there's no way for peace and stability to happen in Syria without a prosecution, without a legal system that will hold those who have blood on their hands accountable for the sake of reconciliation in the country.
I wanted to ask you.
So what she's saying there
about the.
So what she's saying there, basically, if I understand her correctly, is that basically Alawites in Syria wanted a general amnesty because they don't want to be held accountable for their crimes, which basically all of them are complicit in, because they were tied to the former government. And she says that they were all mostly supporters of the foreign government. And then there's more. Then she also says essentially that Alawites are basically a tool of foreign powers, including Iran.
But I have to say the most feared one among people here is Iran, and its affiliated militia, whether in Iraq or in Lebanon from Hezbollah or the Shiite militias in Iraq. They're worried about them interfering in the society, causing disruption and causing instability, especially that many of the Alawites and the Shia in Syria have always been affiliated to foreign powers like in Iran, and they are worried that this is going to continue.
Leninist Sanjawi, thank you.
Of course, there's no follow-up there. So basically, she's saying most of the Alawites in Syria are affiliated with Iran. And then this is exactly that kind of rhetoric was then used to go and slaughter so many Alawites not too long after this comment was made. So that's an example of sectarian incitement appearing even in like alternative media in the U.S. So Kevork, your comment on that.
Of course, I was disgusted when I watched and listened to her, but I wasn't shocked at all. First things first, we have to be very honest with this assessment, because this is a clear incitement of collective punishment against an entire religious domination and sect in Syria. And this is completely untrue, because first of all, the richest people in Syria were not from the Alawite sect, they were from the Sunni sect. The bourgeoisie class was the Sunni sect. Most of the ministers, the defense minister, the head of the intelligence, the vice president, the wife of Assad, etc., etc., they were all from the Sunni families. Assad's economic lifeline, the survival, was based on the Sunni families. And to extent that the Assad the father and Assad the son, they have deliberately kept the coastal cities impoverished, and they didn't build their factories and a big economy for them, so that they would be dependent on the government, on the regime. So this is completely untrue that the Alawites were somehow benefactors of the former regime, or they have been affiliated to or with the Assad family. Secondly, when they say the Alawite sect historically were affiliated with Iran, this is completely taking the Alawites out of the mosaic of the Syrian society. So what she's basically saying, the Alawites are aliens to the Syrian society, and they're not a natural and integral and organic part of the Syrian community. So she's really playing an evil game here against a very, I would say, progressive, very peaceful sect in Islam, which protects human rights, which protects women's rights, which is very tolerant, and there is intermarriage between the Alawites and other sects. And these people are peasants, they are farmers, they are poor people, including this man that we could watch the video later. These people are living below $1 per day on average, to secure food for their family, and then they go on a free spree of killing against entire families and taking out men, first humiliating them, then killing in summary executions. But this is all because, of course, media is complicit, but also the ideologies. What's the ideology, Aaron, of Al-Qaeda, and where is it coming from? It's coming from Wahhabism. And where is the Wahhabism is coming from? 800 years ago, we had Ibn Taymiyyah giving fatwas to kill the Alawites and the Shiites, and Jolani is basing his actions on hundreds of years old fatwas, which are today the core of ISIS and Al-Qaeda in order to wage this genocidal war against the minorities. So whether he abandoned or he said, I'm no longer Al-Qaeda or not, that is completely irrelevant, because you can take a man out of Al-Qaeda, but you cannot take Al-Qaeda out of a man, and the living proof for that is Jolani in Damascus.
Well, let's hear from a victim of the sectarian violence. This is an Alawite man. Now, we haven't verified this video. People have to judge for themselves if they think it's authentic. I think it is personally. It's impossible to verify from being halfway across the world. And this is his testimony. We're not going to play the whole thing because it's graphic, it's very tragic. But let's hear some of what he says. And I'm going to translate. So tell us how your son was killed in the March 7th massacre. A group of about 10 people arrived. They stormed in with force and brutality. They banged on the door. I asked them what they wanted. They asked who was inside. I replied, my family and I. Then, my family and I, they ordered me to come outside. A group of 3 to 4 men surrounded me, while another group entered the house. The group saw my family members inside. As soon as they noticed my sons, they struck them, kicked them with their legs and guns, insulted them with curses. They forced them to lie down here. They sentenced my eldest son to slaughter, continued kicking them with legs and with guns. They dragged them from here to the road. A group came to my youngest son. I told him he fell down 2 days ago, and this one, my youngest, has leukemia. They shouted at me to go inside and shut the door. I was attacked by 3 or 4 of them. I entered, they took them away. While on the road, God sent a group of them to my youngest. They asked, where are you taking him? He's a kid. This other group brought him back to me. Here is your son. There's also my second son. We'll bring him back if there's nothing in his record. I told him we are the poorest family in the village. We mind our own business. I can see that. Continue, please, he's told. Around 4 o'clock, they called for my son, Suleiman, mobile phone. Who is this? I am his father. We have his mobile. What about my son? We do not know. They hung up, called again after a while. Did you know where your son is? No, we did not know. No. We sent your son to Hafez al-Assad, and that's the name of the Syrian, late Syrian, that's the name of the longtime ruler of Syria, Bashar al-Assad's father, Hafez al-Assad. And then he goes on to describe how basically he had to go recover his son's mutilated body from the street. It's very graphic, so we're not going to get to that part. So
they took out his heart,
yeah.
And there is a historical incident behind this. They are repeating historical incidents from the early Islamic history. And this was after the death of Hamza ibn Abdul Muttalib. He was Prophet Muhammad's uncle and the revered martyr in the Battle of Uhud. And there was someone called Hind bint Utayba who was on the opposing side in Quraysh of Mecca. She reportedly mutilated his body in revenge for her father and other relatives. She took out the heart and eaten the heart and the liver. So this is a historical incident that they're trying to copy now in the 21st century. That's why I say this is I really don't have words to describe it. This is complete barbarity, and this man has been confirmed by his story has been confirmed by several sources in Syria, and this man is heartbroken. He and many thousands others. I've seen a video of an old woman, 71-year-old, walking in the street where they killed 3 of her sons, and they're stepping over the bodies of her sons. And she asked them, "Why did you kill them?" And they step over the bodies and they say, "We killed your pigs." And so this is not only about killing. Like, there is this complete psychopathic barbarism that these people are committing against just normal people, you know, because somebody opened his eyes and found himself in an Alawite sect. I mean, how many people in this world has chosen his own religion or sect? Everybody is born in a religion and then they continue the way it is. And these people are judging you in what family and what sect and religion you're born in. Therefore, when we say these Islamist takfirists cannot build a state, because their entire ideology is based on destruction. They can destroy an entire country and they can take over the power, but they cannot build the nation state. Therefore, when I become a pessimist about the Syrian case, as a Syrian myself first, and second, as someone who has been analyzing the Syrian conflict, it's quite clear that with this type of mentality, you cannot build a state, and especially a state for all Syrians. And this means sooner or later, every group in the country, the Alawites will say, we cannot live with this type of barbarity. The Druze will say, we can accept Israel to protect us if this is the fate we will face if HTS comes to us. And the same goes with the Kurds. And I think this was the plan all along. They wanted for someone like Jolani to come to power because he will create the security conditions in the country which would vertically divide the country on ethnic and sectarian basis, and everyone will say, enough, I'm no longer a Syrian, I'm an Alawite, I'm a Shia, I'm a Sunni, I'm a Kurd, etc. So they kill the national identity, they find vertical lines and divisions in the country in preparation for the Balkanization, and this is part of the Yenon plan of Israel for a long time. This is the plan to divide and conquest over the region to establish the Greater Israel Project, which stretches between the Nile to the Euphrates.
And for, an American or someone living in the West watching this who might wonder, well, what does this have to do with us? Well, we paid for all this. The U.S. and their allies spent billions of dollars arming this insurgency that they knew was dominated by al-Qaeda. Jake Sullivan, when he was an aide to Hillary Clinton, he went on to become Biden's national security advisor. He wrote in 2012 to Hillary Clinton, al-Qaeda is on our side in Syria. And this is what our side now is currently doing to the people of Syria.
Kurt was on Joe Rogan's show, just for your respected audience, the other day. He was wearing a T-shirt written "Operation Timber Sycamore."
Oh,
this
yeah,
Kurt,
is the name of, yeah, okay, nice.
Yeah. He was wearing that T-shirt, so that's the name of the CIA operation.
Right. And so, listen, Kev, we're going to wrap. So, any final comments for us? How people should be thinking about Syria going forward?
I think the Americans can definitely put pressure on the Trump administration, especially those in the administration who claim to be caring about the Christians and the minorities in the country. If they're willing to divide the country, they can do it without all this bloodshed. And I think the Trump administration up until this moment has turned a blind eye to these massacres in the country, and they can end this with one phone call with Erdogan and with Tamim in Qatar, because if the plan to divide the country, do it without bloodshed. But if you want to build a nation state, at least help Syria to build a nation state. So America as a superpower, of course, it has a responsibility to stop these massacres in Syria, and they can do it if they speak with their allies.
Yeah, I mean, and because I oppose statism, I think the sanctions should be lifted. We don't have the right to impose sanctions no matter what we think about their government, whether that's Assad or now the former leader of Al-Qaeda. The Syrian people should not be made to suffer anymore, and those sanctions should be lifted. And of course, they never should have been imposed to begin with. Kevork Almassian, host of Syrian Analysis on YouTube. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Jimmy Dore
Thank you so
Show.
much, Aryan. Thank you so much.
All right, we'll go to a break.
Hey, this limited edition bundle is a powerhouse collection designed to energize your days, sharpen your mind, and help you feel younger than the current administration wishes it was. Inside, you're getting the top-selling anti-aging coffee, the ultra-rare Pea Berry Blend, an exclusive 1775 branded tumbler, plus more premium coffee and a limited edition merch you can't find anywhere else. That's a $200 value for just $100. But here's the catch. Only 1,000 bundles are being released. Once they're gone for good. And if that's not enough, every dollar you spend gets you an entry to win the Cybertruck and $30,000 cash. But you've got only 1 month left to enter. Go to 1775coffee.com/Jimmy right now to secure your longevity pack. Drink coffee that fuels your freedom, your values, and your life.